The scorching Arizona sun hung like an unforgiving judge above Willow Creek as Nora Zimmerman stumbled from the stagecoach, her wrists raw from the ropes that bound them. Just 3 weeks ago, she had been the cherished daughter of a Boston physician. Now, in the summer of 1875, she was nothing more than merchandise, brought west to be sold to the highest bidder. "Move along, Miss High and Mighty," growled Silas Everett, the man who had abducted her after her father's death left her vulnerable and without protection. "Those fancy Eastern manners won't fetch much out here, but that pretty face might." Nora lifted her chin, despite the tears threatening to spill. 22 years of proper upbringing wouldn't allow her to show weakness, even as she faced the unthinkable. She scanned the dusty Main Street, searching for any sign of compassion among the weathered faces of this frontier town. The auction was set for sundown. Silas had made that abundantly clear during their journey, whispering the horrors that awaited her if she attempted escape. He claimed to have legal papers declaring her father's debts, making her responsible for payment through whatever means necessary. The papers were forgeries, but who would believe her word against his in this lawless territory? "Water," she whispered, her voice hoarse from dust and despair. "Please." Silas yanked her forward. "You'll get water when I say so. Can't have the merchandise looking too parched, though." He dragged her toward the saloon, where he planned to display her to potential buyers before the formal auction. Inside the dark horse saloon, conversations quieted as Silas pushed her through the swinging doors. The piano player hit a sour note and stopped. Men turned on their stools, eyes widening at the sight of a woman clearly out of place in her torn traveling dress, once fine but now stained with the grime of the trail. "Gentlemen," Silas announced with theatrical flair, "feast your eyes on the finest offering to grace Willow Creek in years. Education, breeding, and beauty all in one package. Auction begins at sundown, but I'm accepting early bids for those who know quality when they see it." Nora's face burned with humiliation as rough laughter rippled through the room. She kept her eyes downcast, unable to meet the hungry gazes fixing upon her. "How much?" called a gruff voice from the back. "She looks sickly," another commented. "What skills she got besides the obvious?" asked a third, triggering more laughter. Silas grabbed her chin, forcing her face up. "Show them your pretty smile, girl." A chair scraped against the wooden floor, the sound slicing through the cacophony. Heavy boots struck a deliberate rhythm as they crossed the room. The crowd parted like water around a stone. "That's enough," came a voice as steady and unyielding as a mountain. "Take your hands off her." Through tear-blurred vision, Nora saw a tall figure standing before them. The man wore a dark duster, trail-worn but of quality material. His face was partially shadowed by his wide-brimmed hat, but she could see a strong jaw dusted with several days' worth of stubble. "Mind your business, Drake," Silas spat. "This is a legitimate transaction." The stranger Drake stepped closer, and Nora saw his eyes for the first time. They were the color of a storm-swept sky and just as turbulent. "She's not for sale," he stated plainly. Silas's grip on Nora's arm tightened. "Everything's for sale in Willow Creek, you know that." The stranger's hand moved slightly, revealing the gleam of a star pinned to his vest beneath the open duster. "A marshal's badge." "I said," he repeated, his voice dangerously soft, "she's not for sale." "On what grounds?" Silas challenged. The marshal's gaze never wavered as he looked directly at Nora, something unreadable passing across his features. Then he turned to the gathered crowd, raising his voice so all could hear. "She's already mine." The saloon erupted in confused murmurs. Nora herself couldn't believe what she'd heard. She studied the stranger's face, certain she had never seen him before. "That's a lie," Silas hissed. "I've been with her since Boston. She belongs to no one." The marshal stepped forward, closing the distance between himself and Silas. Though he made no threatening move, his presence alone seemed to fill the room. "Zane Drake," he introduced himself formally. "United States Marshal, and this woman is Nora Zimmerman, my wife." Nora gasped, unable to hide her shock. The Marshal Zane gave her the barest of glances, a silent plea for cooperation. "There must be some mistake," she began, only to be cut off when Zane reached for her hand. No mistake, Nora, he said, his voice gentler now. I've been tracking you since Denver. He turned back to Sila's. When my wife's father died, I was away on assignment. By the time I received word and returned to Boston, she had been taken, supposedly to settle fabricated debts. Silas's face contorted with rage. You can't prove any of this. Actually, I can. Zane reached into his duster and withdrew several folded papers. Marriage certificate signed last spring in Boston. And this, he produced another document, is an arrest warrant for one Silas Everett, wanted for kidnapping, fraud, and trafficking. The crowd shifted, some men drifting toward the doors, wanting no part in what was unfolding. Others leaned forward, eager for bloodshed. This is absurd. Silas's hand moved toward his gun. In a motion so swift Nora barely saw it happen, Zane drew his revolver and aimed it squarely at Silas's chest. I wouldn't, he advised calmly. Now untie her. With trembling fingers, Silas loosened the ropes binding Nora's wrists. The moment she was free, Zane gestured for her to move behind him. You're under arrest, Everett. Joe, he called to the barkeep, fetch the deputy. As the barkeeper hurried out, Silas made his desperate move. He lunged for Nora, intending to use her as a shield. Zane intercepted him with a crushing blow to the jaw. Silas crumpled to the floor, unconscious. The saloon remained silent as Zane turned to Nora, his expression softening. I apologize for the deception, Miss Zimmerman, he said, voice low enough that only she could hear. But it was the fastest way to end this. You're safe now. Nora rubbed her raw wrists, trying to process everything that had happened in the span of minutes. You're not really my husband? No, madam, but I have been tracking Everett for months. He's taken other women before. I'm sorry I didn't catch him before he got to you. A burly man wearing a deputy's badge burst through the doors, taking in the scene with practiced efficiency. Got him, Marshal? He asked, eyeing the unconscious form on the floor. Got him, Zane confirmed. Lock him up tight, Hank. I'll handle the paperwork after I get Miss Zimmerman somewhere safe. The deputy nodded, hauling Silas to his feet with help from another man. As they dragged him away, Zane turned back to Nora. Do you have any belongings? Nora shook her head. Everything was left behind in Boston or sold along the way. Something like anger flashed in Zane's eyes before he controlled it. Then I'll see you to the hotel. You can rest there while I deal with Everett. I have no money, she admitted, the full weight of her situation crashing down. Her father's estate had been seized by creditors after his death, leaving her with nothing but the clothes on her back. That's not your concern right now, Zane assured her. He removed his duster and draped it around her shoulders. The warmth and weight of it was strangely comforting. As they stepped outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the street. Nora felt the stares of townsfolk as Zane guided her toward the modest two-story building with Willow Creek Hotel painted on its facade. Inside, the proprietress, a stout woman with kind eyes, took one look at Nora's condition and Zane's badge before nodding in understanding. Your best room, Mrs. Tanner, Zane requested, and perhaps something to eat sent up. Of course, Marshal, the woman replied. And perhaps some fresh clothes for the lady. I have a daughter about her size. That would be most appreciated. Once in the small but clean room, Nora sank onto the edge of the bed, exhaustion hitting her like a physical force. Zane remained by the door, respectfully distant. I'll have a doctor check those wrists, he said, nodding toward her injuries. Why did you help me? She asked suddenly. Why claim to be my husband? Zane's expression remained unreadable. Everett is wanted in 3 territories. I've been after him for a long time, as for the husband claim. He shrugged. It was the fastest way to establish a prior claim that even the roughest men in that saloon would respect. But the marriage certificate, forgeries like Everett's papers, sometimes you have to bend the rules to catch men like him. He glanced out the window where the sun was beginning its descent. I should get back to the jail. Will you be all right here? Nora nodded, though in truth she felt anything but all right. Her entire world had collapsed, and she was adrift in a strange town with no money, no family, and no future she could imagine. I'll return in the morning, Zane promised. We can discuss getting you back to Boston then, if that's what you wish. After he left, Nora allowed herself to cry for her father, for herself, for the life she had lost. When Mrs. Tanner arrived with a simple dress, food, and a basin of warm water, Nora accepted them gratefully. The older woman helped her wash away the grime of travel, clucking sympathetically at the bruises on her arms. "The marshal's a good man," Mrs. Tanner told her as she brushed out Nora's tangled hair. "If he's looking after you, you're in safe hands." That night, despite the comfortable bed, her first in weeks, Nora slept fitfully, haunted by nightmares of being dragged onto an auction block while faceless men bid on her future. Morning brought clarity and with it, determination. She would not remain a victim. Whatever happened next, she would face it with the strength her father had always admired in her. When Zane knocked on her door shortly after sunrise, she was dressed in the borrowed clothes, her hair neatly pinned, and her resolve firmly in place. "You look better," he observed, his eyes taking in the transformation. "I feel better," she replied. "Thank you for what you did yesterday," he nodded, accepting her gratitude without comment. "I've arranged for breakfast downstairs if you're hungry." Over plates of eggs and biscuits, Zane explained that Silas would be transported to Denver to face charges, along with evidence linking him to similar crimes across the territories. "What about me?" Nora asked when he finished. "You mentioned Boston." Zane studied her for a moment. "Do you have family there, anyone who would take you in?" She shook her head. "My father was all I had. His practice went to his partner after his death and our home to the bank." "I see," Zane considered this information. "There's a stage to Denver next week. From there, you could continue east." "I can arrange passage." "With what money?" Nora questioned. "And to what purpose? I have nothing and no one waiting for me." "The government compensates victims in cases like yours," he explained. "It's not much, but it would get you started somewhere new." Nora looked out the window at the bustling frontier street. Willow Creek was nothing like Boston, with its rough edges and untamed spirit, but there was something honest about it. "What if I stayed?" she suggested, surprising herself as much as him. "Not here necessarily, but somewhere in the West." Zane's eyebrows rose. "It's a hard life, especially for a woman alone." "I'm not afraid of hard work," she countered. "My father taught me his practice. I have medical knowledge, even if I can't claim to be a doctor." "A healing touch would be welcome in any frontier town," Zane acknowledged. "But you should take time to consider. The West can be unforgiving." "So can Boston," she replied softly. Their conversation was interrupted by the deputy, Hank, who burst into the hotel dining room with urgency written across his face. "Marshal, there's trouble," he announced. "Everett's got friends. 3 riders just came into town asking about him, and they don't look like the type to accept legal explanations." Zane rose immediately. "Stay here," he instructed Nora. "Mrs. Tanner will look after you." As he strode toward the door, Nora called after him, "Be careful." He paused, something unreadable flickering across his face. "Always am," he replied before disappearing into the morning light. Hours passed with no word. Nora paced the confines of her room until Mrs. Tanner convinced her to help in the hotel kitchen, keeping her hands busy while her mind worried. The sound of gunshots in the early afternoon sent her heart racing, but Mrs. Tanner prevented her from rushing outside. "You'll only distract him if he's in danger," the older woman warned. "The marshal knows what he's doing." It was nearly dusk when Zane finally returned, his shirt bloodied and a fresh cut above his right eye. Nora gasped at the sight of him, medical instincts taking over as she rushed to examine his wounds. "It's not as bad as it looks," he assured her as she insisted on cleaning the cut. "Most of the blood isn't mine." "What happened?" she demanded, pressing a cool cloth to his forehead. "Everett's associates objected to his arrest. They won't be causing any more trouble." His tone made it clear what had become of the men. "But we need to move you." If they found Willow Creek, others might too. Everett was part of a larger operation. Nora's hands stilled. "Move me where?" "I have a place," Zane said after a moment's hesitation. "A small ranch about a day's ride from here. It's remote, defensible. You'd be safe there until this is fully resolved." "Your home," she clarified. He nodded. "I'm rarely there, given my duties, but it's well stocked and secure." Nora considered her limited options. Stay in Willow Creek and risk more of Silas's associates finding her, or trust this man she barely knew but who had already saved her once. When do we leave? They departed at first light the next morning. Zane had procured a gentle mare for Nora, along with basic supplies and proper riding clothes. To her surprise, he also presented her with a small revolver. "You know how to use this?" he asked as he showed her how to load it. Nora shook her head. "My father abhorred firearms." "Out here, they're often the difference between life and death," Zane explained, positioning her hands correctly around the grip. "I'll teach you the basics. Not that you'll need it, but it's better to know." The journey took them through stunning landscapes, vast prairies giving way to rugged foothills, dotted with pine and aspen. They spoke little at first, but as the miles passed, conversation came more easily. Zane told her of his childhood in Pennsylvania, his move west after the war, and eventually his commission as a marshal. Nora shared stories of her father's practice, the hours she'd spent learning at his side, and her dashed hopes of formal medical training. "Women doctors are still viewed with suspicion in Boston," she explained. "Father supported my ambitions, but few schools would consider my application." "The West has less patience for such prejudices," Zane observed. "Necessity outweighs convention here. If you can heal, people care little whether you wear trousers or skirts." As evening approached, they crested a ridge and Zane pointed to a valley below. Nestled against a backdrop of mountains stood a modest cabin with several outbuildings, a corral, and a small stream running nearby. "It's not much," he said, a hint of uncertainty in his voice that she hadn't heard before. "It's beautiful," Nora replied honestly, taken by the peaceful setting. The cabin proved larger inside than it appeared from a distance. A main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. 2 doors led off to what Nora presumed were bedrooms. "You'll take my room," Zane instructed, opening the door to a simply furnished but comfortable-looking chamber. "I'll use the spare room when I'm here." "When you're here?" Nora questioned. "I need to return to Willow Creek tomorrow," he explained, "to escort Everett to Denver. I'll be gone about 2 weeks, but you'll be safer here than traveling with me." Fear gripped Nora at the thought of being alone in this isolated place, but she forced it down. "I understand," Zane must have read her expression. "My nearest neighbor, the Wilsons, are about 3 miles east. Good people. I'll introduce you before I leave. And I'll show you where everything is food, water, emergency supplies." That evening, they shared a simple meal of beans, bacon, and coffee. As darkness fell, Zane built up the fire and brought out a bottle of whiskey, pouring a small measure for each of them. "To surviving," he toasted. Nora sipped the burning liquid, grimacing slightly at the unfamiliar taste. "To new beginnings," she countered. In the firelight, Zane's features seemed softer, the perpetual vigilance in his eyes momentarily dimmed. For the first time, Nora saw him not as the formidable marshal, but as a man tired, perhaps lonely, but fundamentally decent. "Why did you become a marshal?" she asked. He considered the question, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "After the war, I needed purpose. The chaos out here, the lawlessness, it reminded me too much of what we'd fought against. I wanted to build something better. And have you?" A small smile touched his lips. "Some days I think so, others," he shrugged. "The wilderness pushes back. For every town that thrives under law, another descends into violence. Yet you continue." "What else would I do?" he asked simply. Nora watched the flames dance, reflecting on how quickly life could change. A month ago, she never would have imagined sitting in a frontier cabin with a marshal who had saved her from unspeakable fate. Now, it seemed the most natural place in the world to be. "Thank you," she said suddenly, "for everything." Zane looked up, surprise evident in his expression. "You don't need to thank me for doing my job. Claiming me as your wife went beyond duty," she pointed out. Something flickered in his eyes, discomfort, perhaps, or something deeper. "It was the most expedient solution." "Still," she persisted, "not every lawman would have gone to such lengths." He set down his glass, his gaze direct now. "No decent man could stand by and watch what Everett planned. You deserved better." The intensity in his voice stirred something in Nora, a warmth that had nothing to do with the fire or the whiskey. For the first time since her father's death, she felt truly seen. Morning brought a flurry of activity as Zane prepared for his departure. He showed Nora everything she needed to know about maintaining the cabin, where to find firewood, how to operate the pump, which cupboards held what supplies. He also introduced her to the Wilsons, a middle-aged couple who greeted her warmly and promised to check in regularly. "You're leaving me with quite a story to explain," she noted as they returned to the cabin. Zane paused in saddling his horse. "I told them you're a friend who needed sanctuary after some trouble. They didn't press for details. And when you return, what then?" He secured a saddlebag before answering. "That depends on what you want, Miss Zimmerman. If it's still Boston, I'll see you safely there. If it's somewhere else in the territories, I'll help you get established. And if it's here—" The question slipped out before she could reconsider it. Zane turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "This is hardly the life you're accustomed to." "Perhaps the life I was accustomed to wasn't the one I was meant for," she countered. A long moment passed between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Finally, Zane broke the silence. "We can discuss it when I return," he said, swinging into the saddle. "In the meantime, keep that revolver close and fire 3 shots if there's trouble. The Wilsons will hear it." Nora nodded, suddenly reluctant to see him go. "Safe journey, Marshal." "Zane," he corrected her. "After everything, I think we're beyond formalities." "Zane," she echoed, testing the name on her lips. "Godspeed." With a final nod, he turned his horse and rode away, becoming smaller against the vast landscape until he disappeared from view. The days passed in a strange rhythm of solitude and discovery. Nora explored the cabin and its surroundings, gradually feeling less like a guest and more like a caretaker. She organized the kitchen, tended the small garden patch beside the cabin, and even attempted to repair a loose shutter with tools she found in the barn. Mrs. Wilson visited twice, bringing fresh bread and company. She taught Nora how to make soap from rendered fat and lye, a skill Nora had never needed in Boston but found oddly satisfying. "You're adapting well," Mrs. Wilson observed during her second visit. "Some city folk never take to the isolation." "I find it peaceful," Nora admitted. "In Boston, there was always noise, always expectations. Here, I can hear myself think." "And what are those thoughts telling you, dear?" Nora considered the question. "That perhaps losing everything opened the door to finding something true, Mrs. Wilson smiled knowingly. "Zane's a good man, carries too much weight on those shoulders, but good to his core." "I barely know him," Nora protested, though her cheeks warmed at the implication. "Sometimes it doesn't take long to recognize what matters," the older woman replied. "My Henry and I decided to marry after knowing each other 2 weeks. That was 32 years ago." The conversation lingered in Nora's mind long after Mrs. Wilson departed. She found herself watching the horizon each evening, wondering where Zane was and when or if he would return. On the 12th day, as Nora was hanging laundry to dry in the late afternoon sun, the sound of approaching hoofbeats sent her heart racing. She retreated to the cabin porch, the revolver Zane had given her clutched in trembling hands. Relief flooded through her when she recognized Zane's broad-shouldered figure atop his distinctive black gelding. She set the gun aside and moved to greet him, surprised by the intensity of her joy at seeing him again. He dismounted wearily, his face showing the strain of hard travel. Despite this, his eyes brightened when they met hers. "You're still here," he said, as if he had half expected to find the cabin empty. "Where else would I be?" she countered. He glanced around, noting the improvements she had made: flowers in a can on the porch, the vegetable garden weeded and thriving, the previously damaged shutter now hanging straight. "You've been busy," he observed. "Idle hands invite the devil," she quoted her father with a small smile. "How was your journey? Is Everett secure?" "He'll face the judge next month," Zane confirmed, leading his horse toward the barn. "He won't harm anyone else." Nora followed, watching as he unsaddled the animal with practiced movements. "You look exhausted." "Long ride," he acknowledged. "Worth it to see this finished." Come inside, she urged. I have stew simmering and you can tell me everything. Over the simple but hearty meal, Zane recounted the trip to Denver, the filing of charges against Silas, and the discovery of documents linking him to a trafficking network that stretched from St. Louis to San Francisco. The investigation will continue, he explained between bites. But Everett was a significant piece of the puzzle. So it's truly over, Nora asked. I'm safe, Zane nodded. As safe as anyone in these territories, which brings us to your plans. He set down his spoon, meeting her gaze directly. Have you decided what you want to do next? Nora had spent many hours contemplating this very question during his absence. The answer had crystallized gradually, becoming clearer with each passing day. I want to stay in the West, she began carefully. My skills are needed here more than in Boston. Mrs. Wilson mentioned that Willow Creek has no doctor, only a barber who pulls teeth and sets simple fractures. That's true of most towns this size, Zane confirmed. I thought perhaps I could establish a practice of sorts. Nothing formal, I have no official training, but I could help with childbirth, illnesses, basic injuries. Zane considered this, his expression thoughtful. It would be a valuable service, but where would you live? Willow Creek can be rough. Nora gathered her courage. I thought perhaps here. Surprise registered on his face. At my ranch, I know it's presumptuous, she hurried on, but you said yourself you're rarely here. It seems a shame for the place to stand empty. I could maintain it, perhaps add a room to use as a treatment area. People could come to me with their ailments. You're suggesting making this your permanent home, Zane clarified, his tone carefully neutral. If that's agreeable to you, Nora replied, suddenly uncertain. I would pay rent, of course, once I establish myself. Zane was silent for so long that Nora began to regret her boldness. Finally he spoke, his voice unusually hesitant. There is another possibility. Oh, he stood, moving to the window, his back to her. When I claimed you as my wife in that saloon, it was a necessary deception. But these past weeks, traveling with you, seeing how you've brought life back to this place. He turned to face her. What if it wasn't a deception at all? Nora's heart pounded so loudly she was certain he must hear it. Are you asking? Poorly it seems, he admitted with a self-deprecating smile. Nora, I've lived a solitary life for many years. I thought that was my fate, perhaps even my preference. But having you here, seeing what this place could be with you in it, he gestured to the homely touches she had added. I find I don't want to return to solitude. He crossed to where she sat, kneeling beside her chair so they were at eye level. I'm not offering a deception this time or a convenient arrangement. I'm offering marriage if you would consider it. Nora searched his face, finding sincerity in his steady gaze. We barely know each other. True, he acknowledged. And I'm not asking for an immediate answer. Take time to consider, get to know me better. I'll court you properly if you'll allow it. And my plans to practice medicine would be entirely your own to pursue, he assured her. This partnership would be equal in all ways. Nora reached out, hesitantly touching his cheek. The connection sent warmth spiraling through her. I would like that, the courtship, I mean, to see where this might lead. Relief and something like joy transformed Zane's expression. He captured her hand in his, pressing a gentle kiss to her palm that sent shivers up her arm. Then we'll begin tomorrow, he promised. For tonight, I should let you rest. But Nora didn't want him to go, not when this newfound understanding hung delicate and precious between them. Stay, she requested, just to talk a while longer. They moved to the porch, watching as stars appeared in the darkening sky. Sitting side by side on the rough-hewn bench, they spoke of hopes and fears, of childhood memories and future dreams. When Nora shivered in the cooling air, Zane wrapped an arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. Is this appropriate for a proper courtship? She teased, even as she leaned into his warmth. Probably not, he admitted, but then nothing about our meeting has followed convention. Nora laughed softly. True, from auctioneer's block to marriage proposal in less than a month, hardly the path I expected my life to take. Do you regret it? He asked, suddenly serious. She considered the question, reflecting on all she had lost and all she had found. No, she answered truthfully. I regret the circumstances, the fear, the uncertainty, but not where they've led me. And where is that? Nora looked up at him, at the face that had become dear to her in ways she couldn't fully explain. Home, she said simply. I think I've found my home. The word hung between them, powerful in its simplicity. Then, with infinite gentleness, Zane lowered his head and kissed her a question and an answer all at once. Under the vast canopy of stars, surrounded by the wilderness that had initially terrified her but now felt like freedom, Nora kissed him back. She knew their path forward wouldn't be easy. The West demanded resilience, and they were still learning each other's hearts. But as Zane's arms tightened around her, she felt certain of one thing. The auction that was meant to strip her of dignity had instead delivered her to a man who would always see her value not as property, but as an equal. She's already mine, he had declared in that saloon. Now, by choice rather than deception, Nora knew it would someday be true.